1943, northern Tunisia. A Harvard anthropologist named Carlton Kuhn is leading a band of 50 American, French, and Arab guerrillas through territory crawling with German and Italian forces. His mission is sabotage. His methods are unconventional. Among the explosives in his arsenal are devices that look exactly like mule droppings. Not approximately like mule droppings, exactly like them. Because Kuhn had collected real samples from Moroccan roads, shipped them to London in a British diplomatic pouch, and received back what he later called perfect plastic explosive facsimiles. What you're about to discover is one of the strangest chapters in wartime intelligence history. Picture this: British craftsmen studying animal waste under laboratory conditions. Film industry professionals building weapons instead of movie sets. And zoo specimens becoming templates for battlefield devices. This isn't fiction. This is the remarkable true story of how creativity, desperation, and theatrical skill combined to create weapons so bizarre that enemies never saw them coming, the challenge confronting Allied saboteurs across North Africa wasn't finding explosives. Every operative had access to enough firepower to cause serious damage. The real problem was opportunity. How do you destroy enemy equipment when every strategic target is locked down tighter than a fortress? Rommel's Afrika Korps depended on supply lines that snaked across thousands of miles of North African terrain. Fuel, ammunition, reinforcements, everything the German and Italian forces needed traveled along these routes. Traditional sabotage. Methods demanded that agents somehow infiltrate railways, bridges, or fuel storage facilities. Every single one of these locations had guards posted around the clock. Military patrols constantly swept the surrounding areas. Anyone attempting to plant explosives at these sites faced almost certain capture or death. Getting close enough. To strike meant getting close enough to be spotted, arrested, or shot. Roads presented an entirely different scenario. Unlike concentrated military installations, roads stretched endlessly across empty desert landscapes and through mountain passes, where maintaining permanent surveillance was impossible. These unpaved tracks crossed terrain so vast that no army could watch every mile simultaneously. And covering these roads was something the Axis forces never considered protecting. Throughout North Africa and the Mediterranean region, camels, mules, horses, and donkeys constantly traveled the same routes used by military convoys. Civilian traffic mixed with military vehicles. Merchant caravans shared the road with troop transports. Local farmers drove their animals past German supply trucks. The result was predictable: animal droppings absolutely everywhere. These deposits covered the roads so thoroughly that drivers stopped noticing them. Vehicle tires crushed dung dozens, sometimes hundreds of times during a single journey. Nobody paid the slightest attention. Carlton Kuhn, the Harvard anthropologist, who had joined the Office of Strategic Services, immediately recognized the tactical advantage this presented. His 1980 memoir, A North Africa Story, contains a telling observation. Mule deposits were the one reliable feature found on all Moroccan roads. Think about what that means from a saboteur's perspective. If you could successfully conceal an explosive device inside something that soldiers actively ignored, you could potentially strike anywhere, anytime, without advance warning. No need to bypass security perimeters. No need to infiltrate guarded facilities. Just place your weapon on the road and wait for a target to roll over it. The concept of disguised explosives wasn't entirely new. Britain's Special Operations Executive, established in July 1940 as a secret sabotage organization, had already pioneered several innovative concealment methods. Their most successful creation was explosive coal. These weren't actual coal lumps, but carefully manufactured fakes designed to explode catastrophically when shoveled into locomotive fireboxes. The devastation these devices caused was extraordinary. When one detonated inside a steam engine, the boiler explosion would derail entire trains and completely destroy the locomotive from within. Researchers Frederick Boyce and Douglas Everett, authors of the authoritative technical history, the scientific secrets, estimate that approximately 3.5 tons of explosive coal were manufactured between 1941 and 1945. But explosive coal had a significant limitation. It required saboteurs to somehow access enemy fuel stores, which meant penetrating security at rail yards or supply depots. The dung bomb eliminated this requirement entirely. Instead of targeting stationary trains at secure locations, it targeted moving vehicles on open roads. Instead of hiding inside coal piles behind enemy lines, it hid in plain sight where anyone could place it. The development of these theatrical weapons fell to the Special Operations Executives Camouflage Section. This unit operated from an unusual headquarters, a converted country house hotel called the Thatched Barn in Boreham Wood, Hertfordshire. Intelligence files designated this facility as Station 15. The commanding officer was Lieutenant Colonel J. Elder Wills, a man whose career trajectory perfectly embodied the unconventional nature of wartime intelligence work. Before the war, Wills had served as an RAF pilot during the First World War before transitioning to the British film industry as an art director. After the Second World War ended, he would become chief art director for Hammer Films, the studio that would define Gothic horror cinema for a generation. But during the conflict, he commanded up to 300 technicians recruited primarily from the nearby Elstree studios. These weren't military engineers or explosives experts. They were prop makers, stage technicians, and plasterers. They were people who understood how to make fake objects appear genuine. For years, these craftsmen had created convincing sets for British cinema, perfecting techniques that fooled audiences into believing painted canvas backdrops were distant mountain ranges and plaster constructions were ancient stone fortifications. Their expertise in theatrical illusion proved ideally suited for creating sabotage devices that could deceive enemy soldiers at close range. The recruitment of film industry professionals represented deliberate strategic choice. The Special Operations Executive needed craftsmen who understood visual deception at an instinctive, almost unconscious level. A military scientist could design an explosive mechanism. A chemist could formulate the charge. But making that explosive looked like something completely different, something so mundane that nobody would examine it closely, that required genuine artistic talent. The same meticulous attention to detail that ensured period accuracy in costume dramas now ensured that fake animal dung matched authentic specimens in every visible characteristic. Walter Boole exemplified this unlikely transition from cinema to sabotage. Before the war, he created elaborate sets for British film productions, mastering the plasterer's art. During the conflict, he developed sophisticated casting techniques specifically for explosive devices. After the war, he would achieve cinema immortality as chief plasterer on Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, crafting the alien landscapes and futuristic interiors that defined that film's revolutionary visual style. His wartime contributions earned him a civil MBE, the same skilled hands that would later construct space stations for Kubrick first built explosive camel dung for British intelligence. The thatched barn itself provided ideal cover for these unusual activities. Before government requisition, it had functioned as a country house hotel. Its rural Hertfordshire location meant that trucks arriving with theatrical supplies attracted no suspicion from neighbors. The proximity to Elstree Studios offered immediate access to a pool of skilled craftsmen who already understood discretion. Many had signed the Official Secrets Act and would maintain silence about their wartime work for decades, according to records preserved at the Natural History Museum. The Special Operations Executive obtained sample animal droppings directly from London Zoo's extensive collection. Each theater of war required authentic specimens from local fauna: camel dung for North African operations, mule and horse droppings for Mediterranean and European campaigns, cowpats for rural France, even elephant dung for potential Far East missions. A substation of Station 15 operated directly within the Natural History Museum itself. In those rooms, craftsmen created detailed plaster molds capturing every characteristic of authentic droppings. They studied texture, color, size, even the way droppings aged and dried under different climate conditions. Perfection was the only acceptable standard. A fake dropping had to prove indistinguishable from genuine animal waste, even under close inspection by suspicious soldiers. Agents' lives literally depended on that authenticity. One unconvincing device discovered by enemy forces could compromise an entire intelligence network. The casting process demanded multiple iterations to account for natural variation. Fresh dung looks dramatically different from dung that's been sitting for a day. Dung in wet conditions differs substantially from dung baked under intense desert sun. The craftsmen created variants for each scenario, ensuring that whatever environmental conditions an agent encountered in the field, the corresponding explosive replica would match perfectly. This painstaking attention to detail separated amateur efforts from professional covert operations. The importance of this work was recognized at the highest levels. Winston Churchill himself visited the Natural History Museum facility to inspect the disguised explosives on display. King George VI made a similar visit. 6 demonstration rooms showcased the Special Operations Executive's bizarre arsenal. The Prime Minister and the King walked past explosive coal, explosive rats, and explosive dung, examining the craftsmanship that might contribute to winning the war. A memorial plaque outside the Mammals Gallery still commemorates the personnel who worked in those secret rooms. The explosive charge concealed inside these devices consisted of Nobel 808, Britain's standard plastic explosive. This green plasticine-like substance had a distinctive almond smell. Nobel Chemicals had developed it before the war, and Station 12 at Aston House had pioneered its application for sabotage operations. The detonation mechanism employed special operations executive designed pressure switches that would trigger when a vehicle tire rolled over the device. The mechanism worked by collapsing a spring-loaded striker onto a percussion cap. The resulting blast was specifically designed to destroy tires and disable vehicles rather than kill. Personnel calibrating the pressure threshold required considerable engineering precision. The threshold had to be heavy enough that footsteps wouldn't trigger detonation. Agents placing these devices needed to walk away safely. Animals crossing roads couldn't set off explosions that would reveal the program's existence and compromise operational security. But simultaneously, the threshold had to be light enough that vehicle tires would reliably trigger the switch every time. This narrow window of activation pressure represented a significant technical challenge. Documentary evidence suggests British intelligence developed these concepts remarkably early. As early as June 1940, according to historian Malcolm McKinn's research in National Archives documents, British Section D established a joint store in Alexandria, Egypt, containing 6 tons of what operatives called toys. This shipment included plastic explosives designed to resemble camel droppings. This predates American involvement in the war by 18 months, definitively confirming the British origin of the concept. The most detailed operational account of these weapons in actual use comes from Carlton Kuhn himself. His memoir describes the entire process: collecting real mule droppings from Moroccan roads, carefully packaging specimens, shipping them to London via British diplomatic pouch, and eventually receiving back the manufactured explosive replicas. Kuhn specifically corrected a Time magazine report that had erroneously described camel dung. They were mule droppings, he emphasized with characteristic precision. He called the device the mule's revenge on the motor vehicle, a phrase that captures both the weapon's absurdity and its tactical logic. Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Rick Atkinson describes Kuhn's unconventional activities in an army at dawn, his comprehensive account of the North African campaign. Kuhn led a band of 50 desperados, blew up a railroad bridge, harassed the local Italian garrison, and scattered mule turds by the bushel. This was guerrilla warfare at its most unconventional, conducted by an academic who spoke fluent Arabic and understood the cultural and geographical terrain better than most career military officers. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. According to Kuhn's own accounting of his booby trap operations, his devices claimed only 2 casualties total, 1 Arab and 1 cow. No confirmed vehicle destruction counts appear in available sources. No German or Italian after-action reports mentioning losses to disguised dung explosives have been located in accessible archives. This presents a fascinating paradox that actually illuminates what made these weapons genuinely effective. The devices appear to have caused minimal direct casualties, but that may not have been their primary purpose. Consider the broader strategic context. Legend has it that German tank drivers in North Africa believed driving over camel dung brought good luck. The story suggests this superstition spread throughout the Africa Corps. Allied intelligence supposedly discovered this habit and exploited it by deliberately planting explosive dung along routes where German vehicles frequently passed, according to the tale. Once Germans realized dung could explode, they stopped driving over fresh droppings entirely. However, they continued driving over dung that already showed tire tracks, reasoning that previously run-over dung must be safe. The British then supposedly created fake dung with tire track impressions pre-molded into the casing. Staying one step ahead in this bizarre tactical game, this countermeasure and countermeasure narrative has circulated widely in military trivia and popular history. However, despite extensive archival searching, no primary source documentation for this story has been located. No Africa Corps veteran memoirs mention it. No German military documents reference it. No academic histories cite evidence for this superstition or the escalating countermeasures. The story should be understood as popular legend rather than documented historical fact. What is absolutely documented, however, is the psychological principle underlying disguised weapons. The Special Operations Executive understood profoundly that fear could achieve more than physical destruction. The most revealing insight comes from their parallel operation using explosive rats. When a shipment of rat carcasses stuffed with plastic explosive was intercepted by Germans before deployment, so files recorded that the trouble caused to them was a much greater success than if the rats had actually been used. The Germans exhibited the intercepted rats at military schools across the continent. They conducted extensive searches for these devices everywhere. Massive resources were wasted chasing weapons that were never actually distributed beyond that first intercepted shipment. The explosive rats were never deployed operationally. Approximately 100 were produced, but none reached their intended targets. Yet German security forces spent countless hours searching for devices that did not exist in the field. The identical principle applied to dung bombs. Once an enemy becomes aware that everyday objects might explode, the psychological burden multiplies exponentially beyond actual casualties. Every pile of dung on every road becomes a potential threat, requiring assessment. Time and resources are wasted on inspection and avoidance. Even if few vehicles are actually destroyed, operational tempo suffers as convoys slow down and paranoia spreads through the ranks. The Africa Corps already faced devastating hardships. Dysentery outbreaks killed soldiers by the hundreds. Supply shortages left units without adequate food, water, and ammunition. The relentless desert heat broke down men and machines alike, adding the psychological burden of explosive dung. Whether that threat was real or merely perceived compounded physical misery with mental strain. Soldiers already struggling with disease and deprivation now had to worry about animal waste. Interestingly, German sabotage services developed their own disguised explosives during the conflict. Declassified MI5 files document an extensive arsenal, including explosive tins of plums and peas, explosive throat lozenges, shaving brushes, batteries, coal, stuffed dogs, and most notoriously a chocolate bar bomb intended to assassinate members of the royal family. But dung appears nowhere in German records. This was a uniquely British and American innovation, perhaps reflecting cultural differences in what seemed plausible as everyday camouflage. The American Office of Strategic Services developed similar devices after entering the war. Their research and development branch under Stanley Lovell created Black Joe explosive coal with specialized camouflage kits for matching local coal types. They documented mule dung explosives alongside the coal, and even developed Aunt Jemima explosive flour that could actually be baked into bread and eaten without harm until deliberately detonated. But the original concepts came from British SOE. with the thatched barn craftsman providing the crucial manufacturing expertise. Among British disguised explosives, the dung variant sat alongside several other remarkable innovations. Explosive. Cole saw verified production and likely operational deployment in multiple theaters. Explosive rats achieved psychological success without ever being used in the field. Explosive logs targeted wood-burning facilities. Explosive fruit tins, bicycle, pumps, and stone lanterns rounded out the catalog. For Far East operations, craftsmen even produced explosive Balinese wood carvings designed to be sold to Japanese troops by undercover agents posing as merchants. The full range appeared in SOEs, Classified Descriptive Catalog of Special Devices, and Supplies, a document listing everything from explosive coal to incendiary cigarettes. This catalog, dating from 1944 and 1945, served as essentially a menu of options for agents planning sabotage operations. They could browse available devices and select appropriate tools for their specific mission requirements. National Archives files extensively document the special operations executive camouflage section's work. File S-100-199 holds a photograph album with 122 images of Station 15B at the Natural History Museum. These records definitively confirm the program's existence and scope, even if operational deployment remains difficult to verify for specific devices in specific locations. The legacy of disguised explosives extends far beyond the Second World War. The fundamental principle of hiding weapons inside objects people naturally ignore has appeared in virtually every subsequent conflict. Improvised explosive devices in Iraq and Afghanistan frequently employed similar psychological tactics, forcing troops to view every piece of roadside debris as a potential threat. Coalition forces who faced those threats were experiencing precisely what Allied planners hoped German drivers would feel decades earlier. The tactical lineage runs directly from those London Zoo specimens to modern roadside bombs. Consider what the explosive dung bomb achieved with remarkably minimal resources. Plaster molds, plastic explosive, a pressure switch, and samples from London Zoo. No advanced technology, no precision manufacturing facilities, no expensive rare materials, just theatrical skill applied creatively to warfare. Film craftsmen from Elstree Studios had created something that could make an entire army second-guess the mundane. Transform ordinary roads into psychological minefields. Kuhn's operations in North Africa demonstrate what unconventional thinking combined with local knowledge could accomplish. A Harvard anthropologist who understood North African culture and terrain intimately, armed with explosive mule droppings manufactured in London, caused disruption far beyond what conventional forces might expect from 50 guerrillas operating. In enemy territory, he blew up a railroad bridge. He harassed Italian garrisons continuously. He scattered his strange weapons across Moroccan roads, creating uncertainty wherever he operated. The confirmed casualties were minimal, 1 Arab and 1 cow. But measuring success purely by body count fundamentally misses the point of what these weapons were designed to achieve. These were weapons of doubt. Weapons designed to make the enemy afraid of the ordinary, to transform roads from reliable supply routes into minefields of uncertainty where nothing could be trusted. Every journey became an exercise in paranoia. The dung bomb was disgusting. Revolting, repulsive, that was precisely the point. Bomb disposal units trained to handle high explosives and complex detonation mechanisms would naturally hesitate before closely examining suspected animal waste. The British had created a weapon so revolting that avoidance became the natural human response. Nobody wants to poke at animal feces looking for hidden explosives. That represents British engineering excellence in its purest form, not always elegant, not always conventional, not always following established doctrine, but effective when it mattered most, practical, unexpected, disturbing. From London Zoo specimens to Moroccan roads, from film studio craftsmen to guerrilla warfare, the explosive dung bomb represents innovation under immense pressure. The weapons legend may have grown considerably beyond its documented achievements, The stories about German superstitions and escalating countermeasures make compelling narrative, the kind of tale that spreads naturally through military communities, but they lack archival support. What remains verified is remarkable enough. Without embellishment, British craftsmen studied zoo specimens to create theatrical props filled with military explosives. American anthropologists scattered those props across North African roads. The devices caused minimal confirmed casualties but introduced a new variable into enemy calculations that couldn't be ignored. Every pile of dung on every road became a question that demanded an answer. Is it real or is it a bomb? That question alone, repeated thousands of times across an entire theater of war, represented victory of a particular kind, not victory measured in destroyed vehicles or enemy casualties. Not victory that appears in official battle reports or casualty statistics. Victory measured in doubt, delay, and psychological burden. Victory measured in resources wasted on inspection. Victory measured in convoy speeds reduced. Victory measured in soldiers' growing conviction that nothing could be trusted, that death might hide anywhere. Even in something as mundane and disgusting as animal waste on a desert road, the principle remains as tactically relevant today as it was in 1943. The most effective hidden weapon is often the one disguised as something too ordinary or too disgusting to warrant careful investigation, something people's natural instincts tell them to avoid rather than examine. That insight, born from theatrical craftsmen studying zoo animals in wartime London, continues to shape modern warfare decades later.